There are people who never raise their voice, and yet they are the most dangerous people you will ever meet in your life. They don't make threats. They don't scream. They don't argue. They just go silent. And that silence destroys you from the inside. Pay attention. Because what I'm about to show you is not taught in any school. You won't find it in any self-help book. And if someone uses it against you, it may already be too late to realize it. Silence has a quality that no word possesses. It is completely undetectable as a weapon. When someone screams at you, you identify it. When someone insults you, you recognize it. When someone lies to you, you can, with effort, find out. But when someone simply goes quiet, you have nothing concrete to hold on to, no evidence, no accusation, no possible defense. There's only you and the void, and your mind filling that void with everything you fear. This is not an accident. It never was. The people who master silence know exactly what they're doing. They know that the human mind cannot tolerate emptiness, that when it receives no information, it creates some, that when it receives no answer, it starts inventing answers. And almost always, the worst ones. Think about the last time you sent an important message and received no reply. Remember that exact moment, what you felt, the discomfort, the doubt, the spiral. Did I do something wrong? Are they angry with me? Did I ruin everything? Nobody said anything to you. Nobody accused you of anything, and yet you were being judged, processed, condemned by your own mind. Silence turns your own head into your worst enemy. There is a pattern that psychologists have studied for decades. They call it strategic emotional regulation. But in the real world, in relationships, in offices, in families, it has another name: control. And silence is its most refined tool. When someone feels they are losing ground in a conversation, that their arguments are weak, that the situation is overwhelming them, there are two paths available. The first is to react, raise their voice, show emotion, expose themselves. The second is to retreat into silence and let the other person collapse on their own. Whoever reacts first loses. Always, without exception. And I didn't invent this. Nietzsche observed it over 100 years ago when he wrote that the man who needs to prove his strength has already lost it. Real strength is not demonstrated. It is felt, and silence radiates it in a way that no word can match. Observe the people with real power, the leaders who generate genuine respect, not fear, not forced obedience, but deep respect. Notice how much they talk, very little, and when they do speak, everyone listens. There is a concept in nonverbal communication that few people know and even fewer master: the active pause. It is not the silence of someone who has nothing to say. It is the silence of someone who has so much to say that they choose not to say it yet. There is an enormous difference between the two. In a negotiation, whoever speaks first after an offer is made concedes ground, always. The most lethal negotiators in the world know this. They make their proposal and then they simply stop and wait and let the silence work for them. Because silence creates psychological pressure without creating confrontation. There is no aggression to defend against, no argument to counter. There is only an invisible, growing, unbearable weight that pushes the other person to speak, to give in, to fill the empty space with concessions. Silence doesn't ask. It demands, without saying a single word. And in personal relationships, it works with a surgical precision that is frightening. Maybe this has already happened to you. Someone you know, someone close, has a particular way of punishing you. Not with words, with absence, with coldness, with that specific silence that is not peace, but a sentence. You call and they don't answer. You write and the reply comes hours later, short, distant, like it said, "You're in the same room," but it's as if you don't exist. You feel like you did something terrible, even though you don't know exactly what. You start apologizing, giving in, changing your behavior to recover something you don't even fully understand you lost. And in that moment, without uttering a single word, that person is controlling you completely. This has a name. It's called punitive silence, and it is one of the most effective forms of emotional manipulation that exists. To understand why silence holds this power, you need to understand something about human nature that most people prefer to ignore. Human beings are social animals, literally, not metaphorically. Social exclusion activates the same regions of the brain as physical pain. Neuroimaging studies at the University of California proved this years ago. When someone ignores you, when someone withdraws their emotional presence, your brain processes it the same way it would if someone had physically hit you. You are not being weak when it affects you. You are being human. And there are people who know this, who use it with precision, with coldness, with a smile on their face when you finally give in. Children learn this mechanic almost instinctively. Crying is the first tool, but then comes something more sophisticated: silent resentment. The child who stops talking to a parent to get something they want is already executing, without knowing it, an advanced psychological strategy. The adults who master it are simply children who never stop practicing. Calculated silence is manipulation in its purest form. No traces, no evidence, no possibility of direct defense. Now comes the part that makes people most uncomfortable. Because it's not enough to talk about people who use silence deliberately to manipulate. We need to talk about something more disturbing. The people who do it without being fully conscious of it. Maybe someone in your life learned in childhood that when things hurt, you shut down. That showing the wound is showing weakness, that silence protects. And now, in their adult relationships, every time something hurts them, they disappear emotionally. Not as a strategy, as a survival mechanism. The result for you is the same: confusion, anxiety, the feeling of walking on glass without knowing where the next broken piece is. Silence doesn't always come from a dark place, but the damage it causes is identical. And here is the real trap. When you try to identify whether someone uses silence as a conscious weapon or an unconscious shield, you spend so much mental energy on the analysis that you've already lost. You're already inside that person's orbit, already responding to their moves instead of your own. There is a specific type of person who uses silence with absolute mastery. Not the ones who shout, not the dramatic ones, not the ones who make scenes. It's the quiet ones, the ones who smile calmly while you fall apart. The ones who have a quality in their presence that makes everyone want their approval. The ones who, when they speak, carry weight. Because they don't speak all the time. They are the observers. The ones who listen more than they talk. The ones who process before responding. The ones who never reveal everything they know. And the question you should ask yourself is, how much of your behavior has been shaped by trying to get reaction from someone like that? How much have you changed, given in, silenced your own needs to avoid losing the connection with someone who keeps you in constant uncertainty about what they feel? Whoever controls the information controls the relationship, and whoever holds their silence controls everything. But there is another kind of silence, and it is completely different. It is not the silence of someone who goes quiet to punish, not the silence of someone who withdraws their presence to manipulate, not the calculated void of someone who wants to watch you search for them. It is the silence of someone who no longer needs anything from you. The silence of someone who has arrived at such a solid inner place that other people's reactions simply don't move them, not because they are insensitive, but because they are stable. This kind of silence doesn't generate anxiety in the person who receives it. It generates respect, a kind of respect mixed with discomfort, because in the presence of someone like that, you realize how much noise you yourself produce, how many unnecessary words, how many justifications nobody asked for, how many explanations that are really requests for approval in disguise. The Stoics knew this. Marcus Aurelius wrote about it in his Meditations, the idea that one must be like the rock against which the waves break, not indifferent to the sea, but not moved by it either. The silence of the strong is not the absence of feeling. It is total presence with no need to prove it. And when someone like that speaks, the effect is completely different from the silent manipulator. It doesn't generate anxiety, it generates clarity. Every word carries weight because there are 1,000 words they chose not to say. The difference between the silence of the manipulator and the silence of the wise is subtle, but whoever knows it feels it immediately. If someone uses silence against you as a tool of control, there is something you need to understand before any tactical strategy. Punitive silence only works if you fear it, if you need that person's approval, if your inner peace depends on their emotional presence. As long as that is true, you will be vulnerable. There is no technique, no argument, no confrontation that will change that. The only real defense against silence used as a weapon is to build an inner life that does not collapse into the void another person creates. Easy to say, brutally difficult to achieve, because it requires something that most people avoid with all their energy: being genuinely okay alone with themselves, without external validation, without constant approval, without needing a specific person to break their silence so that you can breathe again. When you no longer need someone to speak in order to feel okay, their silence loses all its power over you. And there is one more thing, something nobody tells you, because it's uncomfortable. If someone uses silence against you systematically as punishment, as control, as a way of keeping you in a permanent state of anxiety and uncertainty, that is not a communication failure. It is a pattern. And patterns are not fixed with conversations, with patience, with unconditional love. They are fixed with consequences. Or they are not fixed at all. Because the person who learned that their silence destroys you has no real incentive to stop using it as long as it keeps working. You are the only one who can change that equation. There is a truth about silence that has followed me for years, and that very few people are willing to hear. Silence reveals. Always, not the silence used as a weapon, not the calculated silence of the manipulator. The natural silence. The one that appears when there is nothing left to prove, Nothing to defend, nothing to gain. The silence of pure presence, without agenda. When you are with someone and the silence between you is comfortable, when there is no need to fill it with words, when you can simply exist side by side without anxiety, without performance, without image construction, that is one of the rarest and deepest connections that can exist between two people. Most people never get there because they are terrified of silence. Because in silence, the things we don't want to see appear, the fears, the doubts, the echo of the questions we avoid asking ourselves. Silence is not the enemy. It is the most honest mirror that exists, and that is exactly why it is so frightening. People who fear silence fill every available second with noise, constant music, permanent screens, conversations that say nothing but occupy the space where silence might settle in. Because in silence, finally, there is nowhere to hide from yourself. And that, for most people, is unbearable. Those who learn to sit in silence with themselves develop something few people possess. A kind of internal gravity, a presence that needs no justification. They don't feel the compulsion to explain themselves. They don't need constant approval. They don't react to every provocation because they know that reacting always gives power to the other person. They are the ones who speak little and carry much. The ones who don't tell you everything they know about you. The ones who observe you with a calm that disorients. The ones who, when they finally say something, you remember for years. They are the ones who have understood what very few ever grasp, that the most silent power is the deepest, and that whoever controls their own silence controls the entire room without moving a single muscle. People tell you who they are with every word they choose not to say. Learn to read that silence before someone uses yours to read you.